Hello and welcome to Houston Strange. My name is Adam and I will be your host. Today's episode will be a little bit different from some of the more recent ones, but it's more true to what I expected Houston Strange to be when I first started out on this bizarre little project. I had envisioned myself driving through Houston, meeting up for coffee with random people who had their share of unexplained, potentially paranormal encounters. People who had stories they wanted to get off their chest without feeling judged or belittled. Instead, I found myself driving to a host of different towns and cities and meeting some of the loveliest people with wonderful stories. Alas, they all seem to be missing one thing: Houston. I was introduced to Gabriella through our mutual friend Nora, and when the chance finally arose to sit down and have a little chat, I was only too happy to learn that I only need travel as far as Spring Branch. As much as I love the romance of a long drive deep into the heart of Texas, this interview took place a mere 15 minutes from my house, which meant the coffees barely had enough time to cool down while I was setting up my gear. Which brings me to a quick housekeeping point. The gear that goes into keeping Houston Strange alive is constantly being replaced, changed and improved, and I've recently had to invest quite a bit into some new equipment. This all comes out of my own pocket, as the show currently only makes new friendships, not money. So if you would like to help out with production costs, go to HoustonStrange.com and you'll find a link there where you can send a few dollars and become an official producer of an upcoming episode. These funds go directly into paying for gear, gas and overall production costs, but I'm also trying to raise money to get some t-shirts printed and other merch. I've already commissioned some lovely artwork from an independent artist, and I hope to work with a local print shop to get everything made up. This will be a limited edition design, as I hope to continue working with a bunch of independent artists, and if I can pull it off, I can release unique merch every few months. So check out HoustonStrange.com or the links in any of my social media bios if you would like to contribute. Otherwise, just be sure to like, subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're on, and tell all of your friends. A bright blue cloudless sky provided an open playing field for the myriad of birds inhabiting the trees which line the streets of an otherwise quiet, well-to-do neighbourhood hidden just off the Beltway. Gabriella met me with a bright smile usually reserved for close friends and family. She had just gotten off work and had the air of someone who wouldn't approach so much as a picnic without a plan of action. As I rather ungracefully lugged in lights and cameras, she mulled over an organised notebook, presumably full of neatly written lists, reminders, and of course, stories that she was going to tell. Unbeknownst to her, I am the embodiment of disorganized chaos, so keeping on track was absolutely not on the cards on this fine late summer day. Sorry, Gabriella. Behind her bubbly, straight A, head cheerleader professional disposition, however, Gabriella has been living a double life. It's not something she generally talks about, but it would appear to be hereditary, as we'll soon hear.
I am Gabriella, a native Houstonian, and my family has been here for quite a while. We're on generation number 5 here in Houston. So we have been around for a while, which means a lot of our stories kind of just get passed down. And as we experience things, like, we'll tell each other, right? But that's all oral history. So I thought it would be fun to share some of our stories today and just have some that are recorded, because I don't think anyone in my family has ever done that. And I know we have so many experiences, and it's something that I never really introduce myself with when I meet new people. It's definitely something that if you know me, you know the kind of things that I experience, or you might be with me when something happens. And I don't have a lot of control over any of this. It's things that, against my will, I've experienced. I don't seek it out. I don't do any sort of practicing with it. It's not something that I actively try to cultivate as a skill. It's definitely something where I'm just trying to go through my daily life, and these things are happening, and it doesn't matter what time of day. It doesn't matter if I'm with people or not. Especially growing up, I thought it was just the house. I really thought, okay, these are just weird things that happen in the house. It's older, and when I move out one day, all of this will be behind me. And as I went into college and I got roommates, I was like, oh no, this is following me. And so then it kind of turned to maybe it's a me thing. And honestly, based on just family and our beliefs. It makes sense. We're not a family that like will openly be like, oh no, that didn't happen. It's more like, oh, what happened? Tell me. And so I grew up with people who believed me when I told them something happened, or I thought I heard something or saw something. And I think that made a big difference between like how long I was experiencing things. It wasn't just in my childhood. Because I know a lot of people will say that like little kids are more open, or they see things and hear things that, maybe they're a little more pure of heart and they get, calloused through the years and outgrow it. I think if you're around people who are willing to believe you, then you don't have a reason not to believe yourself. I mean, I try to debunk things myself. This is not me saying everything I experience is spiritual. No, things happen, and I'm the first person who will be like, okay, do I need a WD-40, a hinge? Like, I will go and do that. But there's simply things that happen where you can't explain it. I did not grow up watching any of the scary movies. You mentioned The Conjuring. I haven't even seen it. I don't watch that sort of media. I like podcasts. I'll listen to those because I have a really long commute and I like to just have things playing in the background.
I'm going to insert a little ad here.
Yes. I mean, driving into the med center, driving on the loop takes forever. You should put this podcast on. So like I said, I'm not going out of my way to like cultivate that, like, I don't know, it's spiritualism, I guess. Yeah. And so growing up like as a girl who was experiencing these things, I can tell you in my family, it's boys and girls. It's not just the women. Although it is my maternal side of the family, it does not matter what the gender is. Either you really got it or you don't. Experience-wise, going back in time, this is something that has always been a part of like life experiences on the daily. The first story that I don't even remember, I'll be honest, but my mom will say this story the exact same way every time, is I was playing in my room, toddler, learning to talk, but I was playing by myself. She was out in the living room, and I get up and I tell her there's a lady and she's the only other adult in the house. Alarm bells go up. She's like, a lady. She goes up and goes to the room and she's like, I don't see anyone, baby. Like, there's no one here. She's like, are you sure? And I'm little toddler me saying, no, there's a lady, there's a lady. And she's like, is the lady pretty or ugly? And I go, she's pretty. She's a pretty lady. And that kind of started my mom down this journey with me growing up. Like, oh, she's gonna see things I don't. And that's terrifying as a parent. I'm a new parent now. I can't imagine what that would be like. But that is something that, I mean, from the beginning, from when I could start communicating, it was something that I was experiencing things other people couldn't see, and we didn't know who it was. I couldn't tell you who it was, but it wasn't negative. So thankfully, the first experience I ever had was positive, and I continued on my day, and it was fine. It's funny because even now, when we have new babies born in the family, that's something that I always kind of watch out for, like, oh, how are they? Have they seen anything? Have they said anything? Like, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. There's babies that will come in to our family and nothing, and that's fine. And then the times where we'll have a little one see something and say something or interact with their environment, and we witness that happening. We can't just say, oh, you're lying. You're a 3-year-old, you're lying. That doesn't feel right either. So we're like, okay, tell us what are you seeing? Tell them to go away. That's the first thing we say. Tell them to go away. Leave you alone. Tell them leave you alone. So we have to give them the tools to feel like they're in a safe environment, even though there's things that we can't see in that environment with them. We want to make sure they're still okay, even when they're little. This story was in the daytime. This was in the Heights. This was at my cousin's garage apartment, and she was throwing a family breakfast for Valentine's Day. And so we were, all the ladies in the family, getting together, bringing their little ones, and we were getting a tour of the garage apartment. It was our first time there. We were walking down the hallway to the bedroom, and as you pass through this hallway, you have to pass by a bathroom on your left before you get to the bedroom. And I was feeling fine. I was in a new place. I don't know the history to this day. I'm not researching that. I don't want to know. But I was walking through this hallway, and I could tell something was going on with the bathroom. It felt like a person. I didn't want to look in there to see, because I don't like to see things. So I could already tell someone was in there. And I said, let me not say anything, because this is a new garage apartment and I don't want to scare anybody here. That's business I can keep to myself. Go through, tour, it was fine. We're all having breakfast, and one of the little cousins running up and down the hallway as he passes the bathroom stops. And he goes, "Who's that man?" Pointing into the bathroom, saying he's seeing somebody. And we were all there. All of us stopped eating and we're like, huh? He's like pointing, like, there's a man. And he's little. And we were all like, no, tell him to go away. Tell him to go away. Come over here and play. Finish playing in the living room. So he did. Didn't even think about it twice. Didn't go and investigate. He just wanted to keep playing. And I just had to stop and realize what I was feeling. How did he know that that was what I was feeling if he didn't experience something himself too? Why was it the same spot in the house, the same morning? I never said a word to anybody that I picked up on that. And him being a little kid, he just shouted out what he was feeling. To this day, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I didn't even want to go in there and investigate, but I felt bad because I was like, well, I wasn't going to say anything to my cousin and freak her out, and now this little kid did, and so, oh well, that plan's out the window.
Kids are creepy. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There's no two ways about it. We've all heard stories from creepy little kids. My own niece back home has given her mom and dad quite a few scares, and even recently has supposedly been seeing our deceased grandmother here and there. It's easy to brush these things off, usually because we have to appear to be reasonable adults when all we really want to do is hide beneath our covers. The more stories I gather though, the more I'm starting to question if these really are just juvenile imaginings. Gabriella sensing something in that apartment, not wanting to interact or even acknowledge what it could potentially be, only to have her little cousin confirm it. I have to wonder, was this presence really trying to reach out, or was it just as surprised to have these new people in its space? Validation was something of a recurring theme in our conversation that day, and I personally have experienced this one time that I can recall in a paranormal situation, and if anything, it just left me with more questions. But Gabriella, as a lifetime experiencer of the strange, doesn't need it. Time and time again, her intuition, sixth sense, gift, or whatever we want to call it, has only proven itself to be true.
I don't like to see things. I will actively be like, no. Not acceptable. I don't want to see it. Doesn't mean I always get listened to. There have been times where I will see something and everyone's like, oh, was it see-through? They look like people to me. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like seeing the actual person. And I don't see any non-human entities. I'm not even into that. I couldn't tell you if what I'm picking up is demonic. I'm not into that level. But when it happens, it's so sudden to me. It's surprising because I don't expect it half the time it happens. That's how strong this experience comes on and how quick it comes on. and it's over before I know it. And one of those examples happened here in Spring Branch. I was in one of the old churches here in the area, and I was printing something to the church printer. And so I had to walk down the hallway again. With these hallways, I had to walk down the hallway to the printer to go grab it off. And I was coming out of the office door, turning to the hallway, and I saw someone walk through a wall right in front of me in the daytime. And it's so strange because when you see someone in motion, how they're like leaning forward a little bit to finish their stride? That's what I was seeing. Someone had already leaned into the wall and was just finishing their stride, continuing on their way. It was a woman. She had these really gorgeous bright pants on with these really pretty wedge sandals, and she walked right through a wall that did not have a doorway. And I stopped because that was in between me and the printer. And I said, not today. So I turned back around and I kept working. But it was so strange because it took me months to mention this to anyone else who was in the church. And I was like, I did have a story to share. And it was at lunchtime and they were like, what? And I told them what I saw. And I didn't know the history of the building or who I even saw. I didn't even get to see a face because they were already making their way down wherever they were going to. And someone goes, oh, yeah, this used to be a courtyard. Where she walked through was not a building. It was open space. She was probably just making her way through the courtyard and going on her way. And she's like, that had to have been a couple of decades ago, maybe like around the 70s. And I was like, well, that would make sense with the outfit I saw. I couldn't tell you what she was doing, but she didn't care that there was a wall there because back in the 70s there wasn't. So there you go. Based on something like that experience type, that didn't seem like active. It didn't feel like she was about to turn around and be like, hey, you can see me. It was like watching a video. It was like watching a clip, just I happened to see it and it felt like a recording. It didn't feel interactive. I just saw something that happened a long time ago. And I didn't know that that's the layout had an open floor plan right there and it wasn't built up until decades later. At this point, having a reinforce or confirmation or a collaboration of information is kind of like, yeah, I already knew that. And I'm okay going throughout my day without it. I don't need the validation. And I'm not here to prove anything to anybody. And half the time I don't share anything with anybody because we can move on with our lives and it's fine. But when it does happen, it's really cool. It's really fun when that happens because I think I still got it. But it isn't something like I said, it's not something I'm seeking out. So it's not something I'm actively trying to do all the time. But when it happens, it's like, oh, okay.
I love stories like this one. There's no real start, middle or end, just a glimpse of something that once was. This might be one of the oldest variations of paranormal phenomena, and I'm sure we've all heard similar tales, but why does this happen? It's known as a residual haunting. Something that feels more like someone or something stuck in a loop forever carrying out some task or objective. Some people believe this happens when the person's energy is recorded onto the materials of their surroundings. The phrase stone tape theory is often used to describe why this happens, and I've used this expression myself and will continue to use it as a sort of a catch-all for something that sounds plausible, but it's not a scientifically proven thing as some people seem to believe. The higher the energy, the more likely it would be to cause this type of haunting, which, if we were to believe this, would lend credence to the thought that traumatic events like war or untimely death would lead to residual haunts. Gettysburg in Pennsylvania is a great example of this, but also a little closer to home. Think about Audra, our lovelorn bride from the Hotel Galvez. There are other things that aren't as passive though. Things that seem to be intelligent. Things that seem to want to be acknowledged. Things that seem to want to cause fear.
this is jumping back to when I was in middle school. So going back into, being a young woman growing up with this, most of the time it was fine and it was things you can brush off, and it was scary sometimes, more so when I was a little too young to really understand what was happening around me. Like, why am I feeling this really intense feeling all of a sudden of being like super scared, or someone's really watching me like out of nowhere? That was scary. That was scary enough for me to be trying not to run out of a room sometimes in my own home. And I think about that and I think back on that and I'm like, that's kind of sad that I was going through things like that so intensely and I had no guidance really on how to navigate those feelings, and what do you do when you feel like someone's watching you and you can't see? That's scary as a little kid. As I got older, I got a little more assertive with that, and I got a little more boundary setting, proactive. I don't want you here. And so by the time I'm heading into high school, I'd say that's where I got way more control over that. But middle school, it was still kind of all over the place. And one of those experiences happened, it was an old church downtown Houston. And by the time I was in this church, it was already over 100 years old. So like that land had been theirs for a while. And this was in a locker room that they had, and it was attached to the gym. So this was for PE. And I forgot something in the locker room. And it's funny because if you ask other people about the locker rooms there, the word they all use to describe it is creepy. They're like, oh, those locker rooms are creepy. And it's like, okay, yeah, we're all middle schoolers, like we're chicken. But when I tell you, I did not like to be in these locker rooms, but I had to go back to grab something I forgot. I went in there by myself, and there was a U shape to the locker room where there's lockers on 3 sides of the wall. They all started to bang. Like someone was putting their fist against the metal and rattling the locker doors. All of them around me, 3 sides surrounded. And they started like softer, and they were getting louder and louder and louder, thudding until it sounded like I couldn't even hear my own thoughts. And it happened really quickly. It was a quick escalation. I'm by myself just trying to get my combination open, like, okay, what my things? And it was a rhythmic thudding until it was so loud I just gave up and ran. I was so scared. And I have thought about that experience afterwards. I'm like, was it the AC? No, they're not gonna be AC ducts on all 3 walls. The walls themselves were concrete blocks. So it couldn't be people on the other side of the wall hitting through the concrete. They would break their hand before it rattled the lockers on the other side. And why would it be all of them all at once? It was so intimidating. I never stepped in that locker room by myself ever again. And I think back on it now and I'm like, that is so rude to do that to a little middle school child. Like, what is wrong with you? And it's one of those things that really stuck with me because it was so different than any other experiences I had really had up to that point. I had felt scared before, I had felt intense emotions before, and this experience just felt so negative and mean-spirited that it really changed how I interacted with this side of my life. And I think that's probably one of the turning points where I said, like, I don't need this. I actively started to back out of that because I had other things to do. But doesn't mean they stopped. Like I said, it's just one of those pivotal moments for me when I think back, and that was not okay. It felt negative, it felt mean, it felt like the most I don't want you here that I've ever felt up until that point in my life. And I was just not in the mental capacity as a middle school girl to be like, that's not okay. I totally ran. I ran because that was not something I wanted to experience. And it didn't seem like it was going to stop, but I didn't even check to see if they did stop. When I went out the door, I kept running. But you'll hear, there's so many stories about that locker room. And you can say it's plumbing, flushing by themselves, the showers going on and off by themselves. That can all be explained away. It's an old building, the plumbing issues. Okay, yes. I can't explain that one though.
I can't explain it either. Adolescence was a scary enough time for most of us, and I'm sure many of you will agree. But then to have this type of terrifying activity to contend with also. I've read a lot of books based on poltergeist cases, some famous, some less well known, but there are often certain symptoms or patterns that come up time and time again that make us feel that we can almost get a grasp on what's happening. Adolescence is a common theme that comes up in a lot of cases. Unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, there tends to be a teenage girl who appears to be the focus of all the activity. One individual who just happens to be around when it all kicks off. Think of the Enfield haunting or the Battersea or Bridgeport poltergeist cases. The term liminal gets thrown around a lot these days, and I'm sure I've said this in a previous episode, but most of us tend to think of liminal spaces, hallways, staircases, back rooms. But liminality is not just a physical phenomenon. It can be applied to many different stages in our lives. Adolescence is a good example as we straddle the space between childhood and teenage years, transforming, transitioning. Then, just as we think we've figured it all out, high school comes to an end and we're back in another liminal transitional time, moving on to college or work. It can be an exciting time, but it can also bring a certain amount of stress. Moving out of our childhood home, exams, navigating new relationships and responsibilities.
So I went to a old university in Austin, and we have dorm living and then on-campus apartments. So it's old. You're going to feel vibes walking through a really old place. Anyways, nothing I couldn't brush off and keep moving, keep it pushing. This lived with us. And I say this because I don't know that it was actually a person, which is where it makes it more of a unique experience for me, because there was a lot going on at the time with normal stress of university, right? And then I had a roommate, and she had gone through a significant loss in her life. So a lot of just processing happening between the two of us. Not gonna lie, pretty stressed out, a lot of stress. It was definitely one of the more turbulent times in our lives, just transitioning in life. So I think back and I think maybe that was attracting negativity. And we had an apartment, and the layout was you walk in, to your left is the kitchen, and it transitions from the kitchen to the living room area. And then all of the bedrooms and the bathrooms were on the right side of the apartment. Simple layout. I don't know when it really started happening. It was almost like it creeped in over time. And it was just like the room would feel heavier, or it would feel like corners were really dark. It felt heavy, and it felt bad. It didn't feel good in that apartment. And I mean, we were staying in a lot because we were in pretty heavy coursework loads. So I kind of just stayed in my room, and she would stay in hers. And we kind of noticed energy pulling into the living room with it. But then it would be weird because I would go into the living room, and then it felt like it moved into my bedroom. It felt like whatever it was moving away from me. I would be in the kitchen. It would be in the furthest corner in the apartment it could be in. And I say it because I don't know. And it wasn't anything we saw, but it was just I can tell when someone's in a room. I can tell when it was in the room with me, and it would leave. And so she was going through a lot. She was really open, I'd say. And she, to this day, is like, I'm not sensitive. It's because I lived with you. And I said, okay, fine, blame it on me. That's okay. It's not like I was doing any seances. I wasn't doing any Ouija boards. Like, we were not doing anything to, like, let's communicate with the other side. We didn't have time for that. We had finals to study for. But it just was really building up. And she was traveling back to Houston. And for the weekend, she's like, I'm gonna head out. I'm closing my door like she usually does. I don't go in there, it's fine. And it really just felt more like it was a target to her because it was staying away from me. So she was out of the environment, which was really good. I'm sitting by myself on Friday night in the living room. I can feel it there. It's in her room, hiding off in the opposite corner of the apartment from me. I don't know what was triggering this. And it only happened that one time. So it was nothing that I could see like reoccurring or recreate. Her door was closed, and from the inside of her door, it was rattling the doorknob so hard the whole door was shaking intensely. And I'm just minding my own business, eating dinner in the living room, and I texted her. Like, I could pull up the texts on an old phone. I said, it's looking for you. It's rattling your door. And she's like, tell it to get out of my room. I was like, girl, I'm just letting you know when you come back, it's been in there. I don't know what your room's gonna look like. It was just that one weekend, but it was so mad that she was gone. It was upset. It was the only time that it got that physical in the apartment, but it was scary to know that it could get that physical in the apartment. And I mean, we had already been in there for over half the year. Like, we knew the sounds and the creaks and the AC kicking on. Like, I knew the sounds in my apartment. That was someone really shaking the door, like trying to open it, mad. At that point, I'm like, come in here, I dare you. I was at that point in my life already. I was already like, oh, you think you're gonna scare me? I've already been through a locker room experience. You're not gonna do anything to me. This is one of those things where when you're in that close of a proximity with it all day, every day, you just learn to live with it, even though we probably shouldn't have. We actively talked about getting a priest to come to bless the apartment and clean it out. We were that close to making that call because it was just so toxic. And maybe that was us. And I can say, you know, maybe there is some sort of element there to like the negativity that we experience, like physically manifesting. I don't know that. I know that she was going through a lot. It was in her room. It was doors rattling like crazy. And I can only label that as that was strange.
Was this a manifestation of grief or stress? Or a combination of these factors that presented itself in this way? An embodiment of the emotions that both of these girls were going through at this time? Did Gabriella's extra abilities amplify an otherwise normal pool of human emotion to create this truly unsettling experience, as her roommate seems to suggest? Or could it have been an entity like Gabriella and her little cousin had encountered in the apartment in the Heights that just wasn't happy about the girls being there? We'll never truly know, but I'd love to find out more from other people who have stayed in this apartment. Maybe the algorithm can do its thing and help me find some other tenants. I've been lucky enough to receive a whole heap of Galveston stories since those episodes came out, so maybe we can get something similar here. Gabriella doesn't seek these experiences out. In fact, she made it very clear that she has actively tried to close off this part of her life, which to me made her next experience all the more interesting. Similarly to her college experience, this terrifying episode left us with the exact same question. Who or what was this thing?
I've been mentioning stories that happen in the daytime. Of course, there are things that happen in the nighttime. I'll say I know exactly what my sleep paralysis feels like. Mine is very much locked, frozen, of course, and I'm hearing things. I don't see things. When I'm in my sleep paralysis, I'll hear people breaking in, people dumping my drawers out, people sliding things off my countertops and robbing me. I am so scared of people versus anything I've ever experienced in the paranormal side of my life. I consistently, if I have a sleep paralysis experience, will be experiencing a break-in. And I've heard of other people's, I saw something, I felt something sitting on me, and it's more supernatural based fears. I'm scared of people. That's where I'm at. So I had an experience that night that I don't know how to explain. So I'll set the scene here. This is nighttime. I'm going through my bedtime routine. I go to sleep first because I have to wake up before my husband. So he was still in the living room at the time because he didn't have to go to bed yet. I settle in for the night. I have my Alexa playing nighttime babbling brook, whatever to soothe. And we have blackout curtains, which aren't 100% blackout, right? You still see light coming through the edges of the curtain. And so what that means for the room is everything is dark enough to where you don't see details, but you see outlines from where the light is hitting it. So I go to sleep, and it's springtime, it's Houston, it's not cold anymore. So I have a blanket at the foot of my bed just in case, but I don't need it. It's not that cold. I go to sleep. And at some point in the night, I did not check the time, but I was so cold, I woke up, and I love the cold. It takes a lot for me to feel cold because I'm happy to be in 45-degree weather outside. Like, that's great. But it was so cold, it woke me up out of my sleep, and I was like, oh, whoa, didn't expect that cold front. Not that there was a cold front. And so I sit up halfway in the bed, and Caleb is asleep next to me, and he was facing away from me, and I saw him lift his head and kind of turn back to see why I got up. And he's a really light sleeper, so I felt really bad. And I said, I'm so sorry, I'm just really cold. And I grabbed my blanket and I put it back over me, and then I settled in for the night and I went back to sleep. And as I'm going back to sleep, I'm like, oh, the Alexa's off. It's fine. I can sleep. I can still sleep. So I wake up in the morning, and again, I wake up first. So I'm pretty quiet in the mornings. I get up, and Caleb wasn't next to me. And I felt bad because I was like, oh, he might not have fallen back asleep after because the Alexa wasn't on playing, the nighttime noises, and I woke him up, and he's a light sleeper. Maybe he fell asleep in the living room. I'll go apologize to him. So I go up and I get ready, get dressed, and I come out into the living room, and he heard me. And I said, I'm sorry I woke you up last night. And he goes, I didn't come to bed last night. I was in the living room the whole time. What are you talking about? And I said, no, you were sleeping next to me. The Alexa was off. I grabbed my blanket. The Alexa was still off in the morning. Like, you were next to me. You looked at me. I could see your silhouette turn. He's like, no, that wasn't me. And I was like, who was that? I have no explanation for this. And again, I know my sleep paralysis, and I know I wasn't dreaming because Alexa was still off in the morning. It was off when I woke up in the night. I had the blanket draped over me, like when I grabbed it, and no one was next to me. I don't know who that was. And maybe I saw things, but you can tell when someone is next to you and they turn to look at you, you can tell there's a person there. And it felt like a person. I thought it was him. I don't know who that was. Freaked me out bad.
It felt like a person. This is one of those stories that has stuck with me since I heard it. My wife travels a lot for work, so I'm often sleeping alone these days, and this story always has a way of creeping back into my mind just as I'm about to drift off. I've had close friends tell me about potential doppelganger experiences they've had in their own houses before, and I'm sure we've all heard similar stories, but this one feels so intimate, and I think that is what makes it a bit more terrifying. I don't have an answer. I don't think an answer would make this any easier to digest though, if I'm being honest. The temperature dropping in the room, the silence when there should have been a speaker playing, nothing about this story makes me want to find out who or what that was in Gabriella's bed that night. I want to know your thoughts on the matter though, and your opinion on any of the stories that Gabriella was graceful enough to share in this episode. If you have any questions, I will gladly arrange another interview with Gabriella in the future, as I know for a fact that she has more stories to tell. So make sure to comment below or email me at HoustonStrangePodcast@gmail.com. If you're not already following on social media, change that and subscribe or follow. Leave me a rating and review. If you're listening on iTunes, I desperately need reviews, so please go ahead and leave one there. And if you would like to support the show and become a producer of Houston Strange, head on over to HoustonStrange.com or click the link in the show notes. This week's producers were Audrey and Tori. Executive producers were Carl and Marcus. I will be traveling for around the next month or so with work, so some of the formats of the videos might change or be a bit iffy or be delayed, but that's something that we're all familiar with by now anyway. But that being said, if we know of anyone or anywhere in and around the Syracuse area in New York, reach out to me, let me know. I'd love to record one of these while I'm on the road. Houston Strange is an entirely selfish experiment in which I conduct all the interviews, drive to the locations, write the script, the music and edit, but you tell the story. So if you have a story that you would like to share or a location that you would like me to check out, please drop me an email and we can make that happen. And of course, stay strange, Houston.